Can you imagine being a woman and standing up for something you believe in at a time when females were not expected to have a voice? We all have dreams or have something we feel strongly about, but how far would we go to make sure that our dreams became a reality? After researching, reading different magazine and journal articles, and studying some websites, I now can tell you what I know about Lucretia Mott. Lucretia Mott was an early founder of women's rights. Today I will tell you about Lucretia Mott, her life, how she was an early women's activist, her drive to end slavery, and some of the hard times that she went through. I will begin by telling you about Lucretia Mott's life. Lucretia Mott was born in Nantucket, Massachusetts in 1793. She lived to be 87 years old. This was a long time for somebody at that age in those times. Her maiden name was Coffin, and she would marry James Mott. She was born and lived at a time in America when females did not have rights, nor were they expected to voice their opinion. She was born into a Quaker family and even attended a Quaker boarding school in New York. She only attended public school for 2 years before she went to boarding school. She went to school to be a teacher. Education was very important to her. While teaching, she realized she did not get paid the same as males. In fact, males were getting paid twice as much as she was for doing the same job. This would begin her drive for women's rights equality. This is also how she met her husband, James Mott, who was a fellow classmate of hers and was also a teacher. According to a website titled Lucretia Mott that is maintained by the National Park Service and updated on April 6, 2020, Lucretia dedicated her life to the goal of human equality. Lucretia Mott was an early women's rights advocate. She helped launch the women's rights movement. She wanted women to be equal in all aspects of life. She even spoke at the very first Seneca Falls Convention in New York to gain voting rights for women. In 1848, Lucretia, along with her friend Elizabeth Stanton, launched a women's convention in New York. It would be the first of its kind. They talked about social, civil, and religious rights of women. She would use her voice there and platforms that she felt strongly about, and she felt that women should be able to speak in public. She was one of the most radical reformers of her time. She always held her pose no matter what type of audience she was in front of. As you can tell by this picture, she's just a small, timid lady, and that's not what you would expect for someone with such a fierce voice. Lucretia's drive was not just limited to being a women's activist. According to an article, What Made Lucretia One of the Most Fiercest Opponents of Slavery and Sexism by Katie Wheeling, it states that unlike Mott's other contemporaries, she was not willing to sacrifice racial equality for women's rights, and even for her family's livelihood. This meant that women's rights and racial equality were equally important to her. The abolition of slavery and women's rights went hand in hand. She hosted 2 anti-slavery conventions, and she organized the Female Anti-Slavery Society in Philadelphia. She was a delegate of the American Anti-Slavery Society and would attend all 3 anti-slavery conventions. She was chosen as a delegate to attend the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London, where she criticized London for not completely getting rid of slavery, but only putting a halt to it. Her and her husband even helped slaves that were trying to escape through the Underground Railroad. Life was not always easy for Lucretia Mott. As you can tell, being a woman standing up for something at a time when women didn't have rights and Black people were not treated equally would not be easy. There were times where her livelihood was threatened. People threatened her life, tried to threaten to burn down her house, and although they were not successful, they still managed to burn down a building that one of the anti-slavery conventions was held at. Even her and her husband's own family business would be put to a halt. He was a cotton farmer, and because cotton farmers also often dealt with slavery, they put an end to their business, their family business, because she felt strongly in the ending of slavery. Some of her friends even turned their back on her because she believed so strongly that slavery should be ended. Lucretia Mott's voice was heard. She lived life to the fullest. She stood up for women's rights. She wanted to end slavery and even face many hard times. If we could all be like Lucretia Mott, this world would be a better place.